I'm going to finish up a couple thoughts from shaping the defiant will, and then we'll move into the next lesson. Um, so as we were coming to the conclusion of this lesson, there were some points that the author wrote out. We've already discussed a lot of these things, but it's good to reemphasize. These come from page 21 through 22 in your books, and there's some good material to read through there. But just to highlight the points, author calls this 5 suggestions worth considering as you're shaping the defiant will, as you're raising your children. Obviously, we've already talked about the first one, starting early. Um, Earlier, we start makes the later life easier in discipline and in respect. Stay balanced. So we want to keep our cool when we're disciplining as much as possible there. We do still have to keep a balance of both physical and verbal instruction, or physical correction, verbal instruction. Be consistent. We've already hit on that a lot, but it's so important to remember to be consistent. Be reasonable. Remember, as we talked about, are we expecting a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old mind, or whatever age they are, to be at our level? If they're doing something wrong, what are we trying to correct from that? And then keep your sense of humor. So there's going to be times when your kids do something that they aren't supposed to do. Maybe throw a piece of cheese at your face or something like that, And it is kind of funny in the moment, but you also know you have to do some training. I've always had a problem with not smirking when kids do something, and so you just have to kind of train yourself on how you want to handle that, or if you want to swap off which parent's going to take care of it while the other one laughs it up. That's up to you. But also remember that years down the road, you're going to be able to look back at these things and enjoy them as good memories, as funny memories. At the time, maybe not so funny, pretty stressful, but later in life, you do get to look back and say, hey, when you were a kid, you did this, and it was really silly. You got your butt whooped for it, but it was funny, kind of things. And then there was also 3 guidelines that the author kind of suggested. One was establish rules firmly. So come up with the rules for your children that you want to instill. But also, remember, kind of what we talked about. If you have a rule, what's the consequence for not, if they don't follow those rules, having a consequence and sticking to those consequences. Because if you're inconsistent on sticking to the consequences, they're going to pick up on that really, really quick and know that they can get out of things. Discipline privately, I 100% agree with this point. There's some things that are good to discuss as a family. When one kid does something wrong, bringing that, if you have multiple kids, bringing that to the family discussion. But I would agree that in the moment, in the discipline moment, probably best to bring that child away, have that discussion, have that discipline, whatever. And then if you want to bring that in, the learnings back to the rest of the family, do that. Because what you can do is you can embarrass them. You also set yourself up for situations where the other siblings start being like, ooh, doing this kind of stuff. And then you have to get onto them too, and that just doesn't work very well sometimes.
Look, I think that point is extremely important as they get older. Not to call them out in front of peers,
yeah,
or because you can cause some things,
yeah,
some hard feelings and things like that.
yeah. You can set yourself up for failure as a parent. If you're handling that wrong, you're setting that example in front of your rest of your kids. Or likewise, if you embarrass your child, especially I think in that teenage stage, but I've seen Tate do this too, so I'd say 9 and up. They get embarrassed and they start lashing back out at you, and that's in front of all their siblings. Then you have to have that conversation. Hey, you're setting a bad example for your siblings. Now we got to talk about this. So that private discipline is, I agree with Brad, just really important. And then hold your child. When I first read that, I was like hold them down while you spank them, or no, I'm joking. Love, right? We got to show them love. Show them that even in times of discipline, one thing we've always tried to do, hasn't always worked, but after discipline, after we've already talked about why they're getting the discipline, they get the discipline, we'll give them a minute to calm down, we go in, we hold them. We say, look, bad decisions, bad consequences. We love you. We're trying to teach you through this, and hopefully this is what we're going to get from this. So remind them that this comes from a place of love for their spiritual growth. That's the close of that lesson. Any comments that y'all want to add on that? Oh, yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to say. So, one other thing I wanted to say was, we've had a lot of great questions, and there's been conversations after class when things come up, and it's like you can, I don't know, that parents want an answer at these young ages for, man, what can I do here? How do I get out of this? When am I going to get out of this? And I'm learning that it's really hard after you've been through it to give a direct answer because it's so different for every kid in every situation. I would think that most parents with older children would agree with this. That is, if you are concerned, if you are questioning yourself, if you're staying up late at night wondering if I'm doing this right, if you're praying about it, if you're crying, you're doing it. You're figuring it out. It just takes that thought process, it takes that time, it takes that patience, it takes that concern, and if you're concerned, you're doing a good job. You're being a parent. If you're concerned for godliness, you're doing a good job. So, all I can say is just don't get down in these hard moments trying to figure these things out. Am I parenting right? If you're concerned about it, you're doing the right thing. Pray about it. Okay. What makes a family strong? There's some really good stuff we're going to get into with this lesson. So, and I'm starting to really appreciate how this book is flowing because everything does kind of help lead up to the next discussion. So we're going to be looking primarily at this Deuteronomy 6:7, or considering Deuteronomy 6:7. And you shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk to them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. We have brought this verse up previously, but this is like the verse that all of this is going to tie back into. I have a feeling we're going to have some good opportunity for discussion through this. The author starts off the book on page 25 with the question, or with the statement, why families may be in trouble. So before we dig into what makes them strong, why might they be in trouble? He mentions three things, and I added a couple myself, and I'm sure you'll have things to add as well. But the first thing he mentions is absent parents. And this kind of ties into the second point a little bit, but just in the sense that parents can get just so busy, so much going on between work or extracurricular activities, and the actual focused time that needs to be given to the children is diminished throughout the day. So the author puts it this way, they kind of get the leftovers of our time. We're going to take care of everything I need to take care of everything I want to do, and you get what's left. That kind of mentality. Preoccupied parents. So same type concept, but the author ties this to the materialistic goals. Parents who might choose to put themselves in positions when maybe they don't have to, but in order to obtain nicer, bigger, newer things, when maybe they could sacrifice some things and have more time with the family. And of course, this kind of all goes back to the heart, what your intentions are with what you're doing, and only you and God can know that. But if you're choosing something over raising your children, then that may not be the best thing. And then angry parents, I just put, unfortunately, they exist. We do see stories, we see reels or feeds or whatever, news stories, and it's something I can't wrap my head around. I don't understand how anybody could be cruel to a child, but it's out there. And there are just angry parents. They're just mad that they had a kid, I guess. I don't know. But it just, I can't figure it out. But they exist, they're out there, so that's another thing that contributes to family trouble. This is an add-in I had. I was just thinking, I was like, these are good things, but I feel like there's a bigger picture here, and maybe maybe I would see it later in the book. And there's some of this here, but no godly structure in the marriage or home. I think if you're missing godly structure, you're going to encounter family troubles. So first, in the marriage between the husband and wife, if there's you made vows to each other. If you're not sticking to those vows, if you're not living by those vows, and there's tension or there's hatred or there's anger, that's going to destroy your family unit. First as a married couple, but it's going to cascade down to your family, to your kids. They're going to hear and see that and be a part of that, witness that. And it's going to cause problems. The next one is something that I feel like really this comes from someone else from a past time, a past conversation, but I was thinking about this. So I worded it this way: husbands and wives losing each other during this season of raising children. So think about when you start having kids, how much life changes, right? Where you were in those dating or early married stages and what you did with your spouse and the things you enjoyed with your spouse, the time you enjoyed with your spouse. Now you add these little children running around everywhere. Life gets a little bit busier. Your focus has to be and your time has to be divided, right? So that 24-hour period of day gets shorter, right? So I put it this way: our focus, becomes on the children, and that's not a bad thing, right? We need to focus on our children, but do we also need to remember we got to have focus time for each other? Someone worded it this way to me: you need to spend time with your spouse to remember why you fell in love with them. And sometimes I think that is a possibility, that we just kind of become our own persons in some sense, because we're each dealing with so much, and we're so tired, and we're so frustrated or stressed, or we just had so much going on that there's no time for each other. And time for each other in a marriage is very important when you have children. So I think it's a possibility that could be a contributing factor to why families may be in trouble if we're not spending time with our spouse. I wrote this down. I was thinking about it. Like, people used to tell Daphne this constantly. Y'all need to go out. Well, when we moved to Somerset, or actually Nancy, we didn't have nearby family to just drop off our kids and hang out as a couple. And even when you make friends and they're like, well, just drop your kids over. You know. You're always like, I'm not going to do that. Like, they'll be crazy. They'll never want to hang out with us again. There's a lot of just situational things that, in some aspect, we make it harder on ourselves, to be honest. Because if we do make friends and they do offer, even if it's for an hour or two, or 3 hours for a dinner night, a movie night, it'll be okay, right? But it's hard to swallow that pill. I don't know why. Still hard to swallow that pill. But, when we finally did it, I think the first time we let our kids stay over at someone's house from Lakeside, and this wasn't their fault, we went to the auction, Sacred Selection auction night. And when we got back to their house, Kylie had a big black eye. They were running around, and she ran into a horse trailer hitch, and so they felt bad. And I was like, "This is what happens when you leave your kids with other people." Accidents happen, but in all honesty, if you can find that, make that time. If you can make that time, use your friends if they're offering, and take an hour or two if it's been a minute to spend time with your spouse. Go have dinner with them. Do something with them. Most of these other folks, they've been there. They've lived through having young kids, and they don't mind. So or even kids with kids their age. That's even better because they occupy each other. Sam and Jess want to send over Titus and Jude. I'm like, yes, send them over. They'll occupy Tate and Thatcher. This is great. All right. So anyway, any thoughts or additions to why families may be in trouble? I didn't hit them all. If y'all think of one, bring it up. Okay. So family is top priority to God. Deuteronomy 6, this verse, is a family scene. Okay? Moses is addressing those that are getting ready to take over the promised land, right? So we got to think about what are the stages, and we'll see this here in just a second. What are the phases or stages of things that they have been in up to that point? So they were in captivity, right? They were slaves. Were they provided for, able to survive as slaves? They had food, right? They had hard labor. They didn't have much freedom, but they had food, right? They could survive. When they moved into wilderness exploration, were they provided for? What was the difference in who provided for them?
God instead of Pharaoh.
Okay, so stage one, it was Pharaoh providing. Stage two, God is providing now. But they are getting ready to move into this land which flowed with milk and honey, right? Had an abundance compared to what they experienced up to this point. Now it's got all this abundance. And then, of course, an influence of a culture, which was supposed to be wiped out or completely moved out, but that's not what happened. God literally said, I don't want you intermarrying these people. Make sure you get rid of them. But that's not what happened. But knowing this, knowing where they came from, where they've been, Moses comes in, decides to remind them or instill in them the importance of God in the home and family. If you take anything away moving into this place, among these people, remember this. God first. God stays in the family. And how does he do that? How do we make sure that happens? Deuteronomy 6:7. You're going to talk about it all the time in all your walks and all your ways. It's going to be, figuratively written on your hands, and this is what you live and breathe. God in your life. So he instilled this in the young families because the older generations had now passed away through the wilderness years or previous years. So this is what I want this new generation to take with you into this land. That's how important this is. So God and the family is the most important thing. I agree, Philip. And this is what I was talking about a while ago, but bringing up to this, on page 26, the author kind of compares what's called these three waves. And I was talking with Daphne about this a little bit last night. There's some interesting points through here to consider. So starting in section B there, this is from Alvin Toffler in the book The Third Wave, discusses the changing American world of the past 100 years. So number one is the agricultural wave. So 3 generations ago, most Americans lived on farms where they built their own houses, grew their own food. It was a simple life, but not an easy one. Then stage 2, or wave 2, the industrial wave. So the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, America moved to town, factories sprang up, jobs and income were more plentiful, but the very things that made life better also brought temptations that made life worse. And then wave 3, the technology wave, which he says, suddenly we have luxuries of which our great-grandparents could only dream of, but how is the family faring in this third wave? So you think about that, in some similar ways, like that agricultural wave to what the Israelites were first doing, where they're having to work with their hands, but they could still earn their food in a way through all this slave work they were doing. Then they moved to the wilderness exploration, where they now have some things just handed to them, right? There's a little bit more of this sense of security, I guess, with the freedom, even though they were very frustrated about things. But now this technology wave, where what struggles do we really have? Everything's at the click of a finger, right? If I need to order something from some food and I'm at home, I mean, you literally click a button, they can bring your food to your doorstep. So we have things much easier now, much more convenient. But can we get wrapped up or trapped in this convenient world and forget the blessings or where things come from? Would it have been possible for the Israelites to forget, and I believe they did, they took advantage of this, where did things come from when they were in the wilderness exploration? They expected it. Well, you're supposed to give this to us, right? And then in the land of abundance, of course, having so much there when it's right there at arm's reach, kind of like we are today, do we tend to forget to thank God for these blessings and remember where they came from and how good we got it because of what He does for us? So some things are really pulling at us to try to pull us away from remembering God, reminding us of why we have what we have. So similarly, the slavery, the wilderness wandering, the promised land. So it kind of relates, in a way, these three waves. In point 3 of the wave of promise under C, the author says, but would the Jewish families survive surrounded by a climate that was opposed to Jehovah? Sound familiar? Are we surrounded by a climate that is opposed to Jehovah? What would you say? Yes? I think there's a lot of it out there. Of course, the devil's always in action, always working on this. I mean, occasionally, of course, we still meet people and know people that believe in God. We got invited to a church last night, by a guy. And I thought that was impressive, that it was still out there. People still wanting to invite and talk about God in a public setting. So happy those people are out there, but we likewise need to be like that, reminding others that we believe, we have a faith, we want to invite them to experience these things, because there's so much of this climate that is opposed to godliness. Any comments or questions through any of that?
I thought the introduction to this section made an interesting point that before the Bible mentions anything about government or any of that stuff, it mentions the family. I think that should be encouraging to us, that God sees that as the most important thing. That yes, we can get frustrated if government officials, and they can do things that have an effect on our lives and whatever. But really, at the end of the day, it's up to us. The responsibility is on us to lead our families and to raise our children. And God says that will have the most impact. Hopefully, I think that should be encouraging to us. So we can put those other things outside, other influences aside, and do the things that we know are right. And God says that will be a blessing and a good thing for everybody.
Yeah, that's really good.
It just kind of struck me that, looking at these three waves, they seem to almost parallel the concept of the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride. I think what's interesting about those three things is, as different as those ethics of time are, they're very similar in the fact that they gave man something besides God to put their trust in. In the agricultural way, you can say, oh, well, I've worked by the sweat of my brow and made this what it is, and it's, trust in my labor and my ability to work and provide rather than appreciating God's graciousness. The industrial wave, I'll look at this, this ability we have to build things and look what we can build and marveling at our accomplishments in industrial life. And then technology, basically the same thing. Putting our faith in our accomplishments and our wisdom and the things that we've developed rather than understanding that all this stuff that we have is because God set in motion, the forces of the world, the abundance that we have, and all that. And looking at it through that lens. So I think, just as the Israelites did, when they were in slavery, they're like, well, at least we got something to eat, And then when they're in the wilderness, they got something to eat still, God is dropping food on their heads and like, boy, we had it good back when we were slaves, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then in the promised land, just getting so accustomed to the abundance, but failing to recognize God did this for us. And so we can always go down that road if we're not focused on God and focused on that. And that's why, focusing our families on God is so important, because then we're all pulling in the same direction. We're all focused on that one thing that will unite us and keep us bound to Him first and foremost, but bound together in Him, and not wandering off in those different directions.
Anything else?
We had a class one time, you talking about society against God, or however you phrase it. We had, some of you may remember that class, where we were talking about raising kids, and people, even Christians may say, I don't know if I want to raise kids in this climate or whatever, And the person leading that class said, all I want to advise you is, you need people that are so godly people raising kids. His advice was, take this however you want to, get busy. Get busy raising kids and godly environments.
We don't have, it's not an easy task set before us. Think about the walk of Christianity alone, and that comes with its challenges. When you add a mix of trying to raise someone else toward the walk of Christianity, it's a whole other level of challenge, right? But if we aren't doing it, then who is? Or who will? If we're not raising godly children, and the world's not raising godly children, and there's no godly children out there to influence each other, and then God is lost. And that would be the worst thing ever. Guilty as charged, not so much of I don't want to have children, but guilty as charged of thinking, man, I dread what they're going to have to be exposed to or be raised in or be witnessed to. Having to explain to your children why others may act like a cat or use a litter box. Are we really having these conversations? Are we really having these conversations? Or that the devil is winning in certain situations and trying to explain, how or why that happens. But, you get through it and you see some things where after you have these talks and this word diligently, there is so much weight carried with that word that I think we may just read over it and think, well, that just means hard work, right? I have a slide here, and I think one or two more later, but that talks about the word. I use the word woven. About weaving something together, right? It is joined and it is almost impossible to tear apart, woven together. The Word of God is woven into our marriage, into our family, into our lives. That's what this verse is really saying. It is everywhere. It is connected at every piece, and it is not coming undone. Doing that with our children, and then you'll you'll see the fruits of that as they get older and they start pointing out things. I can't believe they would do this, or why can't they believe this, or this is beautiful, or this is God's. And when they say things like that, you know godliness is winning through your children and others' children. And that influence is continuing out there. So there's some fruits of those labors that you'll see.
So to that point, it's one of those ways, agriculture, industrial technology, you know there were challenges in all those ways, raising kids and a family, and God still prevailed, clearly.
Right.
You have all kinds of weekends and camps and things that Christians want to get together and learn more about God. God still prevails in every challenge, every way that we experience. And even what you said about, people thinking they're animals. God will survive as long as we teach.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. I think we can probably get a little spoiled sometimes and say, man, we got a hard road ahead of us. But I wonder if we were there at that agricultural wave, how many of us would be like, this is terrible. What do you mean I got to get up at 3 a.m. and plant the corn? I don't know what corn is. Okay, good stuff. Where's my notes? My notes didn't transfer over. Okay, I'll wing it. So the author also talks about this fourfold survival instruction for young families. The first is to hear the truth continually. Again, tying in Deuteronomy 6:7, and this is where I use the word woven. This is what we're talking about every opportunity that we have. In my notes, I wrote that at any moment with our children is an opportunity to talk about godly things. If we're, especially if you're taking like a nature walk or a hike, you're out looking at a garden, you're at a river, a creek, you're looking at the clouds, the sun. Those are all moments to talk about godliness or what he does when it rains, when it storms, why the grass grows, what for. Those are all God-related questions. We can all tie all these things back to godliness. So we can talk about godliness and his truth in all phases, in any situation. When they move up to their teen drama years and have drama with their friends, you can bring in godliness. You can bring in points from his word about patience and love and kindness and grace and mercy. So there's always opportunity to talk about godliness in our lives, in our walks with our kids and with each other. So again, just think about that term, woven. It was the strongest word I could find that really, I don't know, I'm sure there's 100 words out there, but I just feel like that really tied it. So, second is to love the Lord fervently. Fervently. When you think of that word fervently, what does it mean to you? What does it say to you?
Everything you have.
Everything.
In all actions,
Sorry?
demonstrated in all actions.
Don't cheat. Nah. So what was yours again?
With everything you have.
Yeah, with everything you have. So, I think there's a difference in saying, I love you with everything I have. Saying it versus meaning it, showing it. I know there's a difference when I say, I prayed really hard about that versus I prayed like really, really hard about that. I was down on my knees, I was tears down my face, everything I had. My gut was in this prayer. So it's easy to say things, but it have a different meaning, and this is truly with that everything we have, fervently, always, consistently. And is also demonstrated, yes, in all of our actions.
And I think uncompromising is a big part of that too. There are things that, we can compromise and bend on, but, I looking back on how we were raised and, the importance of serving God that was instilled in us, it was uncompromising. It was, you know, when we went on vacation, Saturday was spent counting down where the local church was, and making sure we knew how to get there. You know, I remember that so many times. That's what we did on Saturday evening on vacation, because that was our priority for Sunday. Where any fun was going to be had, we were going to make sure that we worshiped before speaking. And that made a big impression on us as kids. It's like, it doesn't matter where we are. This is our priority.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And you know, my parents were the same, but my grandparents, I will never forget this. They would take us camping every year at Greers Ferry Lake, and there was a Church of Christ, if you will, that was like a mile up the road. And then there was a Church of Christ that was like 20, 25 minutes down the road. And of course, all of our people who were there with us, they were like, "Oh, we're just going to hop up here to this church, and you know, and we'll be back before you know it. And we'll get back in the lake before it gets too dark." And so we're like, "Let's do that. Like, we can be in the lake, like, you know, right after this church." And it turns out, like, you know, this wasn't the greatest of options in the area, and they knew that, and I didn't know that. And I just could not comprehend why we couldn't get in the lake before it got dark. So we had to drive 20 minutes and miss all the action, but I will never forget it. The lesson I learned from that later in life was they were trying to instill in us choosing wisely where you go and what kind of influence is going to be there. So important. So lessons learned. Your kids aren't always going to love your lessons, but they'll appreciate them later in life. Page 27, under that, love the Lord fervently, that section B there, author writes some things that I thought were really good here. 2 words should impress us, you and all. First, the responsibility falls squarely upon the shoulders of the parents, you. Second, the home that survives is not one with a casual approach to spiritual devotion, all. If your kids survive the third wave world, it will be because they see in their mom and dad a fervent love and an invincible confidence in God. After all, how can we transfer to them principles that we fail to embrace? 2, we teach our kids with our lips, but we must also teach them with our life. Moses, you can't fake it and get away with it. Your kids are too smart for that. So I just thought that was some really good thought-provoking things to think about. How, yes, you know, we think about family, but who does it fall to first, and how does it cascade down from that? So to the marriage, to the parents, and then to all your family. And then that phrase under 1, how can we transfer to them principles that we fail to embrace? So do as I say, not as I do kind of mentality, which so many times can be easy to do. And I will admit there's been times when, you know, Hunter, well, they're not really that bad about it, but we'll say the little boys want to play a video game or watch a TV show, and we're like, "Can't you do anything else? Like, you know, go outside, jump on the trampoline, throw sticks, something." And, you know, then what are we doing, you know, as we're asking them to do that? Just anything. You know, what are they seeing? Or, you know, sitting there on the couch on a Sunday afternoon watching a show, and they're like, "Can we watch a show?" "No, go outside." What example are we setting? You know, so just tie that into more really spiritual impacting things. Are we being the example of what expectation we're setting? We've talked about this already. This word, teach your children diligently. But, you know, Daphne raised this up in a few classes ago, and I think it's a really good question to think about. Do they know their why? The author says it this way. I don't remember where, so I'm going to paraphrase it. Basically, it's one thing to oh, no, I better find it. Something about one thing to know. There it is. Number 2. There is a difference in knowing about the Lord, facts, and knowing the Lord, which is faith. I would almost guarantee you could go to any of our, say 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, and ask them Bible facts. They can give you answers. They'll probably be right. But if you ask them about their faith or their why do you believe? Or why do you think you want to be baptized one day? Or why, fill in the blanks. You might see some struggle to figure that out. Or the answer you hear, it might be cute, if you know what I mean. It's a cute answer, but is it a faith-embedded, real strong answer that you might consider? There's a maturity that needs to come with that, but I just think it's interesting to think about when we think about teaching our children diligently. It's not just about Bible facts, Genesis through Revelations, being able to say all the books of the Bible. It's about knowing their why. Why do I believe what I believe, or why should I believe what I believe? Things like that. Number 4 there. Oh, sorry. We'll go to number 3 because that diligently, this talks about it too. It is a strong word of intensity. In other words, be serious about your instruction. Nothing is more important than what you communicate to them about God. 4, and talk of them when you sit in your house. If teach diligently speaks to formal instruction, talk of them speaks to casual conversation in the course of everyday opportunities. So the Moses question is, do you want to save your family? So talk to your kids about God like you talk about everything else. After all, Christianity is designed for everyday living. We'll stop there, but just some really good thoughts there to follow up on the teach your children diligently. All right. Thank you, guys.